He cheated and let me raise another man's baby. The words still taste like battery acid on my tongue even as I type them. Some nights I wake up in a cold sweat, wondering if it was all just a nightmare. But then I remember I got full custody and child support. And suddenly the world doesn't seem so dark anymore. Let me rewind. 5 years ago, I was a different person. Trusting, naive, desperately in love with a man who could sell oceanfront property in Arizona. Ryan had this way of looking at you, like you were the only person in the universe worth his attention. Those ocean blue eyes, that crooked smile that appeared only when he found something genuinely funny. I fell hard and fast, like a meteor burning up in the atmosphere. We moved in together after 8 months. Got married at the 2-year mark in a small ceremony that my mother called practically eloping, but felt perfect to us. And when the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines a year later, I watched actual tears form in my tough guy husband's eyes. The pregnancy was rough. Hyperemesis had me hugging the toilet for 5 straight months. Ryan would hold my hair back, bring me ginger ale, tell me I was beautiful even when I knew I looked like death warmed over. Looking back, I should have noticed how his late nights at work started right around my 2nd trimester, how his phone suddenly acquired a passcode, how he started showering the minute he walked in the door. But I was growing a human. Sue me for not playing detective while my organs were being rearranged. Emma arrived on a Tuesday morning after 36 hours of labor. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of absolute perfection. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a head full of dark hair that didn't match either of ours. I remember making a joke about the mailman that Ryan didn't laugh at. Should have been my first clue. The next 2 years were a sleep-deprived blur of first smiles, first steps, first words. Ryan was present but distant, always on his phone, working late, business trips that seemed to multiply like rabbits. But he loved Emma, I never doubted that. The way his face lit up when she toddled toward him shouting "Dada" almost made up for the growing distance between us. Almost. The day everything exploded started like any other Tuesday. I was folding laundry while Emma napped. Ryan's phone left carelessly on the coffee table. It buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced over, not intending to snoop, just annoyed at the interruption. The preview notifications were visible on his locked screen. From Melissa, I miss you. Last night was amazing. When can you get away again? The room tilted sideways. My hands went numb, the t-shirt I was folding dropping to the floor. I'd suspected he might be cheating, sure. Had even prepared myself for the possibility. But seeing it, cold, hard proof blinking up at me from his Samsung, was like having the ground disappear beneath my feet. I don't remember deciding to unlock his phone. Muscle memory, I guess. I'd seen him type his passcode enough times. 1-9-8-5. His birth year. Not exactly Fort Knox security. The text went back 3 years. 3 years. Before Emma. During my pregnancy. After her birth. During every stage of our family life, he'd been building a parallel universe with someone named Melissa. I scrolled frantically, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. Pictures. So many pictures. Her face. Her body. Their vacations. Wait, vacations? During his business trips? Then I saw it. A message from 2.5 years ago. Melissa, the test is positive. I'm keeping it. You need to decide what you're doing about your wife. Ryan, I'll figure it out. Just give me time. I love you. The next message nearly stopped my heart. Melissa, I lost the baby. Doctor says these things happen. I'm devastated. Ryan, I'm on my way. We'll try again when you're ready. My entire body went cold as my brain made connections my heart wasn't ready for. I frantically scrolled forward through months of messages, through their grief, through their trying again, through more pregnancy updates. Ryan, she looks just like you. Attached was a photo of Emma. My Emma, taken the day she was born. Melissa, are you sure she's mine? She has your eyes. Ryan, DNA test confirmed it. I'm just glad my wife didn't question the hair color. Told her it was from my grandmother. I'd never met his grandmother. She died before we met. The perfect lie, unverifiable. The room spun as pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The late nights, the distance, the business trips. All the times he'd critiqued my parenting, but was strangely confident about his own instincts for a first-time father. Emma wasn't mine. She wasn't ours. She was his and Melissa's. But that wasn't even the full truth, was it? Because while Emma might not share my DNA, she was mine in every way that mattered. Every sleepless night, every fever, every diaper change and nightmare and first word. I was her mother. I had loved her fiercely from the first moment I knew of her existence. What kind of monsters would do this? Let me believe this child was mine. Let me fall completely in love with her, all while planning. What exactly? To eventually take her away? To maintain this bizarre dual family arrangement forever? I don't remember dropping the phone. Don't remember stumbling to the bathroom. But I do remember staring at my reflection, pupils blown wide with shock, face drained of color, and having one crystal-clear thought: they will not take my daughter from me. The rage came next. Not a hot, explosive anger, but something cold and calculating that I didn't recognize in myself. I took photos of every damning message, emailed them to myself, then carefully placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it. When Ryan came home that night, I served his favorite dinner, smiled, asked about his day, kissed him goodnight, all while feeling like I was watching myself from outside my body, an actress playing the role of unsuspecting wife, while inside, tectonic plates were shifting. For the next week I lived this double life, doting wife on the outside, information gatherer on the inside. I installed a tracking app on his phone while he slept, followed him one day when he said he was going to a client meeting, watched from my car as he entered an apartment complex across town, using a key like he belonged there. I hired a private investigator. Expensive, but worth every penny when she delivered a folder containing photographs of Ryan, Melissa, and Emma having a picnic in a park 30 miles from our home. Emma was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Ryan was laughing in a way he rarely did at home anymore. They looked like a family. The PI included an address, employment information for Melissa, and, most valuably, recordings. Conversations between them where they discussed their complicated situation and how eventually Ryan would leave me, but the timing had to be right, financially. Apparently my income was supporting both households. My successful graphic design business was the steady revenue stream that allowed Ryan's commission-based sales job to weather dry spells. Spells he used to spend time with his other family, it seemed. The final blow came when I accessed our joint accounts and discovered regular cash withdrawals, $2,000 here, $1,500 there, going back years. Money that had been funneled to build his secret life while I worked overtime to make sure we could afford Emma's preschool tuition. That night, as Ryan slept beside me, this stranger I'd given 5 years of my life to, I realized something that turned my blood to ice. If Emma wasn't biologically mine, I had no legal claim to her. If they decided to take her tomorrow, the courts would likely side with her biological parents. The thought of losing my daughter sent me into the bathroom, where I vomited until there was nothing left but bile and fear. But as I rinsed my mouth and caught my reflection again, something shifted in my eyes. A hardness, a resolve. They had chosen deception, cruelty, manipulation. They had broken all the rules. Well, so could I. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Catherine Zhao, a shark in a pencil skirt who specialized in complex family law cases. When I laid out what I knew, even her professionally neutral expression slipped for a moment. They plan to establish custody precedent, she explained after reviewing the evidence. By allowing you to raise the child for years, believing she was yours, they created a situation where you've been the primary caretaker. But their ultimate plan would likely have been to use the biological connection to gain custody once they were ready to proceed with their relationship openly. Can they do that? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Small, afraid. Catherine's smile was thin and dangerous. Not if we move first. What followed was 2 weeks of the most strategic, calculated behavior of my life. I gathered financial records, downloaded phone records, set up a separate bank account, prepared a safe place for Emma and me to go, all while maintaining the facade of normalcy at home. I still cooked dinner, still asked about his day, still tucked Emma in with stories and songs. The only difference was that now, when I kissed her goodnight, I would sometimes have to leave the room quickly so she wouldn't see me cry. Through it all, one question kept me awake at night. Did I want revenge, or did I just want Emma? The answer, I realized as I stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m., was both. I wanted my daughter safe and with me. And I wanted them to pay for what they'd done, not just to me, but to her. This innocent child they'd used as a pawn. The plan Catherine and I developed was beautiful in its simplicity. We would not confront. We would not accuse. We would simply act. And so, exactly 17 days after discovering the truth, I waited until Ryan left for work, packed essential belongings for Emma and myself, left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table that read, "I know about Melissa. I know about Emma. Expect to hear from my lawyer." Then I drove away from the house I'd turned into a home, from the life I'd believed was real, with my daughter securely buckled in her car seat behind me, babbling about the squirrels she could see out the window. In my rearview mirror, the home Ryan and I had shared grew smaller, then disappeared as I turned the corner. Ahead lay uncertainty, legal battles, and pain, but also the possibility of justice. Emma fell asleep halfway to the extended stay hotel I'd booked under a name that wasn't mine. Looking at her peaceful face in the mirror, I made a silent promise. This child, biological or not, would know she was loved, protected, and fought for. And the people who had conspired to use us both would learn a very expensive lesson about the mistake they'd made. They'd underestimated the woman they'd tried to destroy. The first 48 hours after leaving were a blur of tears, phone calls, and Emma asking where Daddy was. Each time she asked, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I settled on a simple answer. Daddy had to go away for a while, but we would figure everything out. Not a lie, technically. We would indeed figure everything out, just not in the way Ryan might hope. Catherine moved with impressive speed. By the time Ryan started blowing up my phone, exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes after I assumed he'd found my note, we had already filed emergency temporary custody papers. The evidence we presented was damning, proof of deception, financial malfeasance, and the potential flight risk Emma faced from parents who had already demonstrated a willingness to engage in elaborate deceptions. The judge, a severe-looking woman with silver hair and reading glasses that magnified her already intense gaze, granted the emergency order within 24 hours. Ryan was legally barred from taking Emma anywhere without court approval or my presence. His texts oscillated between rage and pleading. "Where the hell are you and Emma? Please come home so we can talk about this. You're overreacting. It's complicated. You have no right to take my daughter." That last one almost made me throw my phone across the hotel room. No right? I had every right. I was the one who had rocked her through colic, kissed her scraped knees, memorized the exact way she liked her sandwich cut. Diagonal, never squares. I was the one who knew that her favorite stuffed animal was a threadbare bunny named Hoppy, not the expensive teddy bear that sat pristinely on her shelf, the one I later learned had been a gift from Melissa. Catherine advised me not to respond to any messages directly. Instead, her paralegal sent a brief professional email informing Ryan that all communication should go through our legal team. I forwarded his increasingly frantic texts to her without replying. "Rope," she murmured during one of our strategy sessions. "We're giving him rope." I understood the metaphor. My rage wanted immediate satisfaction, but my brain, and Catherine, knew that patience would yield a much sweeter victory. Day 3 brought the first salvo from Ryan's attorney, a slick corporate type named James Westfield who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. His email to Catherine was a masterpiece of condescension and veiled threats, suggesting that as Emma's biological father, Ryan had inherent rights that would obviously prevail in any custody dispute. Catherine's response was 2 sentences long. "Please refer to Exhibits A through G, previously filed with the court. We look forward to discussing settlement options once you've had adequate time to review." Exhibits A through G were the text messages, financial records, and PI reports documenting the elaborate deception. I pictured James's face as he reviewed them, the slow realization that his client had neglected to mention some rather important details. The thought brought me my first genuine smile in days. On day 5, I moved Emma and myself from the hotel to a small but cheerful furnished apartment Catherine had helped arrange through a friend. The property wasn't listed in my name, ensuring Ryan couldn't track us down. Not that he could approach anyway. The temporary restraining order saw to that, but the psychological comfort of knowing he didn't know where we slept helped me actually get some sleep. Emma adapted to our new surroundings with the resilience only a toddler can muster. "Adventure House," she called it, delighted by the novelty of new rooms to explore. I decorated her temporary bedroom with fairy lights and put up her favorite animal posters, trying to create normalcy in the midst of chaos. At night, after tucking her in, I would sit on the small balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the unfamiliar skyline and wondering how my life had imploded so spectacularly. 5 years of marriage erased. A child I thought I'd carried, born from another woman's body. A husband who had orchestrated a deception so profound, it seemed like the plot of a psychological thriller, not my actual life. The tears came less frequently as days turned to weeks. Anger became my more constant companion. Cold, clarifying anger that helped me focus on the endgame, keeping Emma and making them pay. I threw myself into building our case. Working closely with Catherine, I documented every moment of Emma's life that proved I was her primary caretaker. Pediatrician visits where I was the parent who took her. Preschool records showing I was the emergency contact who'd picked her up when she had fevers. Photos chronicling our daily lives, me teaching her to bake cookies, reading bedtime stories, helping her learn to write her name. Psychological parenthood, Catherine explained. It's a legal concept that recognizes that being a parent isn't just about DNA. It's about who actually does the parenting. While I built our positive case, Catherine's investigative team dug deeper into Ryan and Melissa's deception. What they uncovered made my stomach turn. This wasn't just an affair that had resulted in an unexpected pregnancy. This was calculated. Melissa had known Ryan was married from the beginning. There were texts where they explicitly discussed how to handle the wife situation. They had considered telling me the truth after Emma was born, but decided against it when they realized my income was essential to maintaining their lifestyle. Ryan had even consulted with a lawyer about his options nearly 2 years ago, but was advised that given my bond with Emma, he should wait until she was older before attempting to transition her to Melissa's care. They had been playing the long game, and I was the unwitting pawn. Then came the twist that even Catherine hadn't anticipated. Melissa reached out through her own attorney, not to threaten or demand, but to offer information. She wanted to meet. My initial reaction was visceral rejection. The thought of sitting across from the woman who had helped orchestrate this betrayal made my skin crawl. But Catherine counseled pragmatism over emotion. "This could be valuable," she said, her voice measured during our phone call. "If she's willing to provide testimony about the deception, it strengthens our unusual circumstances argument. And if she's turning on Ryan?" She let the implication hang. The meeting was set for a neutral location, Catherine's office, with both our lawyers present. No Ryan. I spent the night before cycling through emotions, rage, curiosity, dread, and something else I couldn't quite name. Perhaps the perverse desire to finally see the face of the woman who had been the shadow in my marriage from the beginning. Melissa was not what I expected. In my mind, I'd constructed an image of someone flashy and overtly sexual, a femme fatale type who'd seduced my husband with obvious charms. The reality was a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a conservative blouse, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. Catherine did most of the talking. Melissa's lawyer, a younger woman with a no-nonsense attitude, occasionally interjected. I sat silent, studying the biological mother of my child, searching her face for traces of Emma's features. The story that emerged explained much but justified nothing. Melissa and Ryan had dated in college before I ever entered the picture. They'd broken up when career paths took them to different cities, reconnected when Ryan's job brought him to her town, and began their affair almost immediately after. She'd known he was married but believed him when he said it was failing, that he stayed with me out of obligation. When she became pregnant, they'd seen it as fate. But practical considerations, finances mainly, led to their elaborate scheme. Ryan convinced her that the easiest path was for him to pretend the baby was mine and slowly extract himself from our marriage over time, setting them up for a life together once he was financially ready. "I never meant for it to go on this long," Melissa said at one point, her voice barely above a whisper. I found my voice then, surprising myself with its steadiness. 2 years and 7 months is a very long time to accidentally continue a deception. She had no answer for that. What she did have, however, was evidence. Text messages, emails, and recorded conversations different from those I'd discovered, documenting Ryan's promises to her, his strategies for managing both relationships, and, most damning of all, discussions about eventually seeking full custody of Emma, cutting me out completely once they married. "Why are you giving us this?" Catherine asked the question I couldn't bring myself to voice. Melissa's eyes met mine directly for the first time. "Because he's been lying to me too. He never intended to leave you, not while your business was supporting us. And ... She hesitated. "I found messages with someone else, a third woman. This is who he is." The revelation should have hurt. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something I'd already intuited. Ryan wasn't just a man who had made a mistake, he was a fundamentally dishonest person who saw relationships as resources to be exploited. "I don't want to take Emma from you," Melissa continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I've watched from a distance. I've seen what a good mother you are. Better than I could have been." She slid a document across the table. "I'm willing to sign this." It was a statement relinquishing any claim to maternal rights, acknowledging my role as Emma's psychological mother, and confirming the deception that had taken place. Later, in Catherine's office, we analyzed this unexpected development from every angle. Was it a trap? A strategy? Genuine remorse? Regardless of Melissa's motivation, her statement and evidence were legal gold. "This changes things," Catherine said, reviewing the documents for the third time. "With Melissa's testimony about the deception and her support of your custody claim, we're in a much stronger position." Ryan's case just collapsed. That night, as Emma slept surrounded by her stuffed animals in our temporary home, I allowed myself to consider the future for the first time since discovering the truth. Not just survival, actual victory. A life where Emma remained with me, where the people who had conspired to use us both faced consequences for their actions. The next phase of our strategy took shape over the following weeks. Catherine was methodical, building a legal trap so complete that Ryan would have no room to maneuver. Financial forensic specialists followed the money trails, documenting every dollar Ryan had diverted. Child development experts prepared statements about the psychological harm of separating Emma from the only mother she had ever known. And Melissa's testimony was formalized in a detailed deposition that left no doubt about the calculated nature of the deception. Through it all, I maintained the compartmentalization that had become my survival mechanism. During days I was focused, strategic, and active participant in building our case. I also returned to work, my graphic design clients unaware of the drama unfolding in my personal life as I continued meeting deadlines and taking conference calls. For Emma, I created a bubble of normalcy, play dates, trips to the park, bedtime stories, and pancakes shaped like animals on Saturday mornings. She asked about her father less frequently as the weeks passed, which both relieved and saddened me. Children adapt. They move forward. Sometimes I wished my heart could learn the same lesson. Nights were harder. When the apartment grew quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, doubts would creep in. Was I doing the right thing? Was it selfish to fight for a child who didn't share my blood? Would Emma resent me someday for keeping her from her biological parents? Then I would remember the evidence, the calculated deception, the plans they had made to eventually take her from me, and resolve would harden again in my chest. This wasn't about biology. It was about love, care, and who had truly been a parent to this child. The breaking point for Ryan came 53 days after I'd left our home. Catherine orchestrated a devastating 1-2 punch. First, a judge denied his motion for emergency visitation based on the evidence of deception and potential flight risk. Second, our forensic accountant's report revealed the full extent of his financial malfeasance, including tax fraud related to business expenses he'd claimed while actually funding his second household. His lawyer requested a settlement conference. Catherine's smile as she delivered this news reminded me of a documentary I'd once watched about great white sharks. "Now," she said, "we dictate terms. The terms we crafted were comprehensive. Full legal and physical custody of Emma to me. Supervised visitation for Ryan on a graduated schedule that would begin only after he completed parenting classes and therapy. Child support calculated at the maximum allowable percentage of his income. A lump sum payment representing my share of marital assets plus compensation for the funds he had diverted. And a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent him from discussing the case publicly, protecting Emma from the sordid details as she grew older." "He won't agree to all of this," I said, reviewing the document. Catherine shrugged. "He doesn't have to agree to all of it. This is our opening position. But given the alternatives, a public trial where his deception is laid bare, potential criminal charges for the financial improprieties, complete loss of access to Emma, he'll agree to more than you might think." She was right. The negotiations were tense but brief. Ryan, once confronted with the mountain of evidence and Melissa's cooperation, had few cards to play. His attorney, now a different, more pragmatic man than the aggressive James Westfield, focused on damage control rather than victory. In the end, we got 90% of what we asked for. Full custody to me, significant child support, Financial restitution. Ryan received slightly more generous visitation terms than we'd initially proposed, still supervised initially, but with a clearer path to unsupervised time if he met certain conditions. The day I signed the final agreement, I felt hollow. The victory that had consumed my focus for months was finally achieved, but there was no triumphant swell of music, no sense of completion. Just documents with signatures and a faint emptiness where rage had burned for so long. "What happens now?" I asked Catherine as we walked out of the courthouse. She glanced at me, her expression softening slightly. "Now you go live your life. On your terms. My terms." It had been so long since I'd thought about what those might be. For months, my sole focus had been keeping Emma and making them pay. With both objectives achieved, I stood at the threshold of a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. That evening, Emma and I baked cupcakes in our small apartment kitchen. Pink frosting smeared across her cheeks as she enthusiastically wielded the spatula, chattering about the playground she'd visited that morning with her sitter while I was at the courthouse. "Can we go home soon?" she asked suddenly, catching me off guard. "I miss my big girl room." Home. The house where we'd lived with Ryan wasn't home anymore. I'd arranged for a real estate agent to list it as part of the settlement. But Emma didn't know that yet. "We're going to have a new home," I told her, helping her add sprinkles to a particularly messy cupcake. "Just for you and me. And you can help pick your new big girl room." Her eyes lit up at the prospect of choice, the empowering magic of agency that even 3-year-olds crave. "Can it be purple?" "It can be any color you want, sweet pea." As she returned to her sprinkle application with renewed focus, I felt something unfamiliar bubble up in my chest. Not anger, not grief, not the cold calculation that had driven me for months. Hope. We had survived. We had won. And tomorrow, we would begin again. But first, there was one more conversation I needed to have. One final confrontation before I could truly close this chapter. After months of legal proxies and strategic maneuvers, I needed to look Ryan in the eye one last time. Not for closure. I didn't believe in such tidy psychological packages anymore. But for something more primal and necessary, I needed him to see exactly who he had underestimated and what that mistake had cost him. Catherine had advised against it, of course. "Nothing good comes from these emotional confrontations," she warned. "Let the legal victory speak for itself." But some things transcend legal advice. Some reckonings need to be witnessed face to face. I arranged for the meeting at Catherine's office, with Emma safely at a playdate with her preschool friend. Security would be present in the outer office, the entire interaction recorded for legal protection. I chose my outfit carefully, not for vanity but for armor. A sleek black dress that reminded me of my strength, heels that put me at eye level with Ryan, minimal jewelry except for the delicate necklace Emma had picked out, with the sitter's help, for my last birthday. As I waited in the conference room, I felt oddly calm. The hurricane of emotions that had driven me for months had settled into something still and clear. I knew exactly who I was now, forged in betrayal, tempered by strategy, defined not by what had been done to me, but by how I had risen in response. When the door opened and Ryan walked in, the man I had once loved, now a stranger wearing a familiar face, I straightened my spine and prepared for the final act of this unwanted drama. The time for planning was over. The time for reckoning had arrived. Ryan looked smaller somehow. Less the towering figure who had dominated my world for 5 years, more a man diminished by his own choices. He wore the navy suit I'd picked out for him last Christmas, his power suit for important client meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. He remained standing, hands gripping the back of the chair across from me. "Did I have a choice? Your lawyer made it sound important." "It is important. Please, sit." He did, reluctantly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Looking for weakness, probably." The old me would have offered conciliation, smoothed over the awkwardness, made this easier for him somehow. That woman was gone. "I want to know why," I said simply. He blinked, clearly expecting accusations, not questions. "Why what exactly? Why the elaborate deception? You could have left me when Melissa got pregnant. You could have told me the truth after Emma was born. You could have done 1,000 different things that didn't involve making me fall in love with a child you planned to eventually take from me. So why?" Ryan's jaw tightened, that familiar tension that always appeared when he felt cornered. "It's complicated. Uncomplicated for me. Look, when Melissa got pregnant, we panicked. We weren't ready, financially, emotionally. You and I were stable. It made sense at the time to just incorporate the baby into our marriage. Our marriage. The words tasted bitter. The one you were actively betraying. I never meant for it to go on so long, he said, echoing Melissa's words from weeks before. Things just got complicated. Complicated, I repeated. Is that what you call setting up a second household? Funneling my money to support your girlfriend while I worked 60-hour weeks? Planning to eventually take Emma from the only mother she's ever known? Is that just complicated, Ryan? Color rose in his face. You're twisting things. I care about Emma. I wanted what was best for her. What was best for her? I said slowly. Or what was best for you? His silence was answer enough. Here's what I've figured out, Ryan. This wasn't about Emma or even about Melissa. This was about control. You wanted everything. The stable wife, the exciting girlfriend, the child, the double life. You wanted to make all the decisions, set all the terms. My role was just to finance your charade and provide convenient childcare until you decided I wasn't necessary anymore. He shifted uncomfortably. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is manipulating someone for years, making them love a child with their whole heart while secretly planning to rip that child away. What's not fair is stealing thousands of dollars from your wife to fund your affair. What's not fair is lying to my face every single day for nearly 3 years. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. But here's the thing about unfairness, Ryan. Sometimes it circles back around. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was the final custody agreement, the financial settlement, all the legal documents that represented his loss of control. These are being filed with the court today. It's done. He opened the folder, scanning quickly, his face draining of color as he absorbed the details. You can't seriously expect me to only see her for supervised visits. I'm her father. Yes, you are. And if you'd behaved like one, if you'd been honest, if you'd put her needs above your convenience, we might be having a very different conversation. But you chose deception, repeatedly, for years. These are the consequences. His hand flattened against the documents, as if he could somehow erase them through physical pressure. This is vindictive. You're punishing me because I hurt you. No, Ryan. I'm protecting my daughter from a man who has demonstrated that he can't be trusted. The supervision requirement isn't permanent. Meet the conditions. Therapy, parenting classes, regular scheduled visits, and you'll earn more time with her. It's entirely up to you. My daughter, he corrected, a flash of the old arrogance returning. Biologically, she's my daughter, not yours. Don't forget that. I smiled then, a genuine smile that seemed to unnerve him more than anger would have. Biology is just science, Ryan. Motherhood is something else entirely. I've changed every diaper, kissed every scrape, stayed up through every fever. I know her favorite songs, her fears, the exact way she likes her peanut butter sandwich cut. I'm her mother in every way that matters. I stood, straightening the hem of my dress. You know, for months I've been consumed with anger, planning, strategizing, focusing every ounce of energy on making sure you faced consequences. But sitting here now, looking at you, I realize something surprising. What's that? He asked warily. I don't hate you anymore. I just feel sorry for you. You had a real family, maybe not the one you originally planned, but a real one nonetheless. And you threw it away for... what exactly? Control? Ego? The excitement of leading a double life? Whatever it was, I hope it was worth it. His face hardened. You won't get away with this. I'll appeal. I'll fight you on every... Save the threats for someone who still fears you, I interrupted calmly. We both know you won't appeal. An appeal means depositions, testimony, evidence entered into public record. Emma will grow up someday, Ryan. Do you really want court transcripts detailing exactly what you did? Because I'm prepared for that fight if you are. The flash of panic in his eyes told me he wasn't. Ryan had always cared deeply about appearances, about how others perceived him. A public legal battle would shatter the carefully constructed image he'd maintained among colleagues, friends, family. The choice is simple, I continued. Accept these terms, be a consistent, honest father to Emma moving forward, and slowly rebuild some kind of relationship with her. Or fight me, expose everything, and risk losing her completely. Your call. I gathered my purse, ready to leave him with his thoughts. "Oh, and there's one more thing." He looked up, wariness etched in every line of his face. "The child support and financial settlement? I'm using part of it to start a college fund for Emma. The rest is going toward opening my own design agency. I've already signed a lease on the office space, that brick building on Maple Street that you said was too expensive when I talked about expanding last year. Turns out I can afford it after all." His jaw clenched so hard I could almost hear teeth grinding. Money and status had always been Ryan's twin gods. The thought of his money funding my independent success was perhaps the sharpest cut of all. I paused at the door, looking back at him one last time. "Emma asks about you sometimes. When you're ready to be the father she deserves, consistent, honest, present, let Catherine know. We'll arrange the first supervised visit." Walking out of that room, I felt pounds lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for months. Not closure exactly, but something better. Freedom. Catherine was waiting in her office, eyebrow raised in silent question. "It's done," I said simply. She nodded, professional as always, but I caught the glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. "The papers will be filed this afternoon. Legally speaking, this chapter is closed." The weeks that followed unfolded with surreal normalcy. Emma and I moved into a sun-filled condo across town, close to her preschool and my new office space. She chose a lavender color for her bedroom walls and spent an entire Saturday directing me exactly where each stuffed animal should live on her new bookshelf. Watching her take ownership of our new space, I glimpsed the resilient, assertive woman she might become and felt a fierce pride. Ryan began the required therapy and parenting classes without further legal challenges. His lawyer communicated that he would adhere to all conditions of the agreement. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following month, giving Emma and me time to settle into our new routine. Melissa remained a peripheral figure. After providing her testimony, she moved to Seattle for a job opportunity, distance that seemed beneficial for everyone involved. Her lawyer conveyed that she would respect my role as Emma's mother and had no intention of disrupting our lives. Whether this was genuine remorse or simply pragmatic acceptance of her limited legal options, I couldn't say. Either way, the threat she had once represented had dissolved. The opening of my design agency became a focal point for my newfound energy. Years of building a freelance clientele while suppressing my larger ambitions, always with Ryan's cautionary voice in my ear, had created a wellspring of ideas and contacts just waiting to be leveraged. Within 3 months, I'd hired 2 junior designers and an office manager. Within 6, we were turning away clients. Success, I discovered, is its own form of justice. Emma thrived in our new life. The consistency of our routine, the absence of the underlying tension that had pervaded our household for so long, allowed her natural exuberance to flourish. She made friends easily at her new preschool, developed an obsession with space and planets, and declared her intention to be an astronaut veterinarian when she grew up. The first supervised visit with Ryan came and went without drama. Emma was initially shy with the father who had become somewhat unfamiliar, but their biological connection seemed to bridge the gap. She returned home full of stories about the playground they'd visited and the ice cream he'd bought her, seemingly untroubled by the social worker who had hovered nearby throughout. "Daddy seemed sad," she observed that night as I tucked her in, her perception startling as always. "Sometimes grown-ups feel sad when things change," I explained carefully, smoothing her hair away from her forehead. "But that doesn't mean the change isn't necessary or good." She nodded, accepting this with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Can I have 2 bedtime stories tonight?" And just like that, we moved forward. Ryan continued to meet the conditions of our agreement. Over time, his visits became more regular, the supervision requirement eventually lifting as he demonstrated consistency and appropriate boundaries. We developed a detached but functional co-parenting relationship, communicating primarily through a parenting app that documented all exchanges for legal purposes. I caught glimpses occasionally of the man I'd thought I'd married, in the careful way he listened when Emma described her latest art project, or how he remembered that she was afraid of dogs with pointed ears. These moments would stir a complicated grief for what might have been, had he been capable of honesty and fidelity. But they were just moments, quickly replaced by the reality of who he had proven himself to be. The final piece of my revenge, though justice felt like a more accurate term, came almost accidentally during a client meeting 18 months after our separation. I was pitching to a major sportswear company, walking their executive team through a comprehensive rebranding proposal, when I noticed one of the VPs studying me with particular intensity. After the meeting, she approached as I was gathering my materials. "Your presentation was exceptional," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Reeves, VP of Marketing. Thank you. It's a project I'm particularly excited about." She smiled, something knowing in her expression. "I have to ask, are you the same person who was married to Ryan Mitchell?" The question caught me off guard. I was, yes. "We're divorced now," she nodded. "I thought so." "We crossed paths professionally when he was trying to land the Axios account last year." A pause. "Your name came up." My stomach tightened. "Did it?" "He suggested that your design work was derivative, that your success was largely due to connections he had provided." Her direct gaze held mine. Given what I've seen today, I'd say that assessment was significantly off the mark. The casual cruelty of it, Ryan still attempting to diminish me professionally even after everything, should have hurt. Instead, I found myself laughing, a genuine, freeing sound that seemed to surprise us both. "Ryan's assessments are often off the mark," I said when I could speak again. "It's something of a pattern," Victoria smiled. "Well, his loss is apparently our gain. We'd like to move forward with your proposal. All of it, including the digital integration pieces that our CFO was hesitant about." That evening, I signed the largest contract of my career, with a company that had declined to work with Ryan's firm 6 months earlier. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. When I called Catherine to share the news, her typically reserved demeanor broke into open satisfaction. "Sometimes the universe delivers its own verdicts," she mused. "With a little help from strategic planning and excellent legal counsel," I added. Naturally, the contract not only solidified my agency's financial stability, but raised our profile significantly within the industry. Within weeks, we had to lease additional office space to accommodate new hires. My income now dwarfed what Ryan paid in child support, a fact that his most recent tax documents, legally available to me through our ongoing financial arrangements, confirmed he was well aware of. 2 years after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I found myself sitting on the balcony of our condo, watching the sunset with a glass of wine. Emma was having her monthly weekend visit with Ryan, the custody schedule now settled into a predictable rhythm. My phone buzzed with a text from my new partner, Jacob, a kind, straightforward architect I'd met through a client, confirming our dinner plans for the following evening. The life I had now wasn't one I'd chosen or planned for. It had been forced upon me by betrayal, shaped by necessity and survival instincts I hadn't known I possessed. Yet, looking at what I'd built from the ashes of that deception, a thriving business, a peaceful home for Emma, even the beginning of a relationship based on actual honesty, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude. Not for what Ryan had done, that remained unforgivable, but for what his actions had ultimately revealed, my own capacity for resilience, strategy, and reinvention. The final, most satisfying form of revenge wasn't the legal victory, the financial settlement, or even the professional success that had eclipsed Ryan's. It was the simple, profound realization that he had never been essential to my happiness or success. He had been, at most, a temporary obstacle, one I had overcome with spectacular thoroughness. My phone buzzed again. A text from Ryan. "Emma wants to know if she can bring her new spacebook for you to read together when I drop her off tomorrow." I texted back, "Of course. Tell her I can't wait." And I couldn't. Because while revenge had been a necessary fuel for a time, it was Emma, this extraordinary child I had fought so fiercely to keep, who represented the true victory. Ryan had intended Emma to be the instrument of my eventual heartbreak. Instead, she had become the center of a life far richer and more authentic than the one built on his deceptions. That night, I updated the document I'd been maintaining since the custody battle began, a detailed account of everything that had happened, written as a letter to Emma that she would receive when she was old enough to understand. Not to poison her against her father, but to ensure she knew the truth of her origins, and more importantly, how fiercely she had been loved and fought for. I added a new final paragraph. "The woman I was before all this happened no longer exists. In her place stands someone stronger, sharper, more defined by what she's overcome than what was done to her." I hope that when you read this someday, you'll understand that the greatest gift that came from this painful chapter was the mother I became through fighting for you, someone who discovered that her capacity for love was matched only by her capacity for strategic justice. And if life ever tries to break you the way it tried to break me, remember, underestimating a woman who loves her child is always, always a critical mistake. 3 years later, and the most unexpected development in this whole saga is how ordinary it all feels now. The custody schedule, the co-parenting app notifications, the polite nods when Ryan picks up or drops off Emma, it's all just life. My new normal. Emma is 6 now, halfway through kindergarten and obsessed with building elaborate structures out of anything she can find. Yesterday I found her arranging my expensive throw pillows into what she called a quantum physics laboratory. I have no idea where she gets these concepts, but I suspect her science-focused after-school program might be responsible. "Mom," she said last week while I was cutting apple slices for her snack, still quartered, never whole, some preferences remain consistent, "why don't you and Daddy live in the same house like Lily's parents?" The question I'd been preparing for since the day I walked out of our old home had finally arrived, delivered casually between bites of fruit as if she'd asked about the weather. "Well," I said, choosing my words carefully, "sometimes parents realize they can work better as a team when they live in different homes. Like how you and Zoe are best friends, but sometimes play better when you have your own space." She considered this, head tilted in that way that makes her look so much like the woman in the mirror. "Did you and Daddy fight too much?" "We had different ideas about being honest with each other," I said, which felt true without being cruel. "And sometimes when grown-ups can't agree on important things like that, it's better for everyone if they make a new plan." She nodded with the solemn wisdom of childhood. "Like when Lucas and I couldn't agree on the rules for our spaceship game, so we made 2 spaceships instead." Exactly like that. I've been meticulous about never speaking ill of Ryan in front of Emma. Children are perceptive. They don't need our editorializing to form their own impressions. Besides, the most devastating revenge isn't poisoning a child against their parent. It's raising them to recognize dishonesty and manipulation on their own. Jacob proposed last spring, on a weekend when Emma was with Ryan. We'd been together for nearly 2 years by then, taking things at a glacial pace that drove my mother crazy, but felt right to us. "Are you sure you want to do this again?" I'd asked him afterward, both of us breathless and laughing on the balcony where he'd nervously dropped to one knee. "Marriage to a woman with my particular baggage?" He'd taken my face in his hands, his expression serious despite the champagne-induced flush on his cheeks. "I'm not marrying your baggage. I'm marrying you, the woman who turned catastrophe into an empire and never lost her capacity for kindness in the process. I'm not sure about the empire part, though my agency has now expanded to 3 cities. But the kindness comment made me pause. Had I remained kind through all this? It wasn't a quality I'd prioritized during the scorched earth phase of my revenge. Yet somehow, despite everything, I'd managed to preserve the parts of myself worth saving. Emma took the news of our engagement with characteristic pragmatism. "Will I get to be a flower girl?" was her primary concern, followed closely by whether Jacob would still make his special Sunday morning waffles after they were married. When assured that both traditions would continue, she gave her enthusiastic blessing. Ryan's reaction was more complicated. The flash of genuine pain in his eyes when I informed him about the engagement was unexpected. Not because I thought he still harbored romantic feelings, our marriage had been dead long before I discovered its fraudulent foundation, but because it represented another milestone in the life he'd lost access to. "I'm happy for you," he said after a moment, and the surprise was that he seemed to actually mean it. He's good with Emma." "He is," I agreed, wondering when we'd reached this strange place where we could acknowledge truths without weaponizing them. The real shock came 3 months later, when Ryan asked to meet for coffee without Emma, something that hadn't happened since our final confrontation in Catherine's office years before. I selected a busy cafe near my office, curious but cautious. The Ryan who arrived was a subdued version of his former self, the designer clothes and carefully styled hair replaced by a simpler, less calculated appearance. "I'm moving," he said after we'd exchanged awkward pleasantries. "Seattle. A firm there made an offer I can't refuse." Seattle, where Melissa had relocated years ago. The connection wasn't lost on me. "What about Emma?" I asked, my protective instincts immediately flaring. "That's why I wanted to talk in person. I know the custody agreement gives me 1 weekend a month plus holiday rotations. I'm proposing we modify that to longer but less frequent visits, maybe 1 week every other month plus 2 weeks in summer and keeping the holiday rotation. It was a reasonable request, one that would actually reduce his total time with Emma, but consolidate it into more meaningful chunks. Still, I was surprised by his willingness to see her less often. "She'd miss your regular visits," I said, studying his face for hidden motives. "She looks forward to your weekends." Something shifted in his expression, a softening I rarely saw anymore. "I know, and I'll miss her too. But this move is important. For me." "Melissa?" I asked directly. He nodded, no denial or defensive posturing. "We've been talking again, trying to sort through the mess we made. I've been doing a lot of work in therapy these past few years, trying to understand why I did what I did. The Ryan I'd married would never have admitted to needing therapy, much less voluntarily discussing what he learned there. This vulnerability was new territory. Are you getting back together?" The question came out more neutral than I'd expected, uncomplicated by the bitterness that once would have colored every interaction. "We're trying." Slowly. "She's changed too." He met my eyes directly. "I don't expect you to forgive what we did. I wouldn't, in your position. But I wanted you to hear about the move from me, not through lawyers." I considered this unexpected courtesy, this small acknowledgement of the damage he'd caused. "I appreciate that." We worked out the logistics of his proposal over the next hour, the conversation remarkably productive without the toxic undercurrents that had characterized our interactions for so long. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. "There's one more thing. I had my lawyer draw this up. It's not legally required, but..." He slid the envelope across the table. "I thought you might want it for Emma." Inside was a notarized letter acknowledging me as Emma's mother in every sense that mattered, relinquishing any intent to ever challenge my custody on biological grounds, and expressing his commitment to supporting my role in Emma's life, regardless of future circumstances. It was, in essence, surrendering the one weapon he'd retained all these years, the biological connection that courts typically prioritize. The one thing I couldn't take through legal maneuvering or strategic planning. He was giving it freely. "Why?" I asked, genuinely confused by this voluntary relinquishment of power. His smile held a hint of the old Ryan charm, but tempered now with something that looked remarkably like wisdom. "Because it's true. You're her mother. You always have been." When I told Jacob about the meeting later that night, he asked if this changed how I felt about Ryan. If forgiveness was now possible after this apparent growth. "Forgiveness is complicated," I said, watching the city lights flicker on as evening descended. "I don't hate him anymore. I actually hope he finds whatever he's looking for in Seattle. But forgiveness? That implies the slate can be wiped clean. Some things leave permanent marks." "Fair enough," Jacob said, sliding his arm around my shoulders. "So what do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. "Peace, I think. Not because of anything Ryan did or didn't do, but because somewhere along the way, I stopped defining myself by what happened to me and started defining myself by what I built afterward." The wedding was small and deliberately void of traditional elements. Emma wore a purple dress she helped design, throwing flower petals with scientific precision. My mother cried. Jacob's son from his first marriage, now a teenager, managed to look simultaneously bored and pleased throughout the ceremony. Ryan attended with Melissa, an inclusion that raised eyebrows among friends who knew our history but felt right somehow. An acknowledgement that the tangled roots of our past had produced something worth preserving, Emma's sense of family, complicated and unconventional as it might be. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about building something so beautiful from the ashes that no one remembers what burned in the first place. Emma starts first grade this fall. My agency just landed our biggest client yet. Jacob and I are talking about adding to our family, though the thought still terrifies me some days. Life continues to unfold in ways I never could have predicted when I found those messages on Ryan's phone 4 years ago. The letter Ryan wrote for Emma sits in my safe deposit box alongside the one I've been writing since the beginning. Someday, when she's old enough, she'll read them both and understand the complicated truth of her origins. But she'll also understand the simpler truth that has emerged from all this chaos. Family isn't defined by blood or biology or even the perfect revenge. It's defined by who stays, who fights, who builds something worth having. and who realizes eventually that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living authentically, on your own terms, surrounded by love that isn't perfect, but is absolutely real. That's a victory no one can ever take away.